life in 3 dimensions got me bent and got me twisted. I know I done said a lot, but I should probably stop pretending. I don't really hold the key and I can't really push a button. I just step up to the mic and try my very best to bust it, but I ran out of breath. It's tight in my chest. My feet just might fail. I can't stand the pressure.
What's going on, everyone? You're listening to Racially Speaking. I'm your host, David Phipps. And look, I'm sitting here just kicking it with, I'm just going to continue to say our all-time favorite guest. I feel like you're kind of a co-host when you come on. I'm sitting here with the Alethea Lamberson, all the way from the West Coast at the wee hours in the morning. Yo, what's going on? Thank you so much for coming on here at the crack of dawn.
What's up, y'all? Yes, it is 7:45 in the morning. And anyone who knows me well knows I'm not a morning person, like not even relatively close, unless I absolutely have to be up for work or travel. But when David Phipps sends you a text and says, "Hey, I got a crazy idea. You want to be on the pod?" And it said 7:30, but it didn't say AM or PM, and I was like, he's going to say AM. He said AM. I said, well, first, what are we talking about? Then he told me. Then I was like, okay, David, for you, I will get up this early. But I got my coffee, so I'm good to go. Got my coffee. I made extra this morning because I will need it. But it is good. It's good to be here. And so we were in this atmospheric river, if you heard about the storms hitting California in SoCal, and we have partly cloudy. The sun came out, so this is the first time in 3 days that it is presently not raining. So I am grateful to wake up. I
was going to say, not to make it about me, but you said the sun's out, so you're not going to lose power while we're doing this?
Thankfully, we have not, where I'm at, we have not lost power at all. So we've been good to go. Wi-Fi was a little funky, but we should be good to go. But it's nice to have some sunshine out, and so I can wake up to that after how the last few days have been. So.
Okay, so people are doing the math. You're up at 7:30. Full disclosure, like I'm doing this 10:30. Now it's it's about 10:45. Now, just to be clear, this is the earliest I could do it, so I'm not just like getting you up, Leith, and being like, I'm gonna have a chill morning, get some stuff done, and then clock in and start recording at 10:30. So I would have done it. I would have, and also I didn't want to make you get up even earlier. So hopefully that was fairly obvious. I get that a little earlier wake up call might have been. I get that I'm privileged with the 10:30 recording time.
It's all good. These are choices I've made. Moving to the West Coast. This is what will be your reality.
I was going to say, more importantly, how many Lakers games have you made it to? Zero. That's
zero,
okay.
So far, because these ticket prices and it's tough out here. So it's on my list for 2024. So my hope is I need to catch a game. So we'll see what the spring holds, and if I can find a cheap ticket for maybe some nosebleeds, or someone would want to bless me with a ticket. So
they were just over here on the West Coast. They were just in Charlotte. I was so close to biting the bullet and making a trip down, but I haven't loved what I've been seeing. We'll beat the good teams, and then we'll go and lay an egg down your way in Atlanta, your former way. And who else do we lose to? Houston.
Yep.
I'm just I can't risk paying that money for that kind of bitterness that would inevitably well up inside me if I watched them.
You just never know.
I know that if I went, they would have lost to Charlotte.
How you lose those games, but then you beat the Knicks. Oh, it was close. Anyways.
Well, I was checking the score. They were up by like 20, and I checked the final score just to see. I was like, how did we almost lose?
Yep.
How? Oh yeah, that's right, because that's what we do.
Yep.
All right.
Houseway.
Look, that's a good segue here. Okay, we talked about NBA. It's no secret if you listen to the podcast, Leith, we are basketball junkies. How much do you follow the NFL? Do you rock with the NFL?
Do I rock with the NFL? That I would say no. Let's see. I know enough. I mean, just kind of generally with sports, I look at ESPN, like my app every day. So I follow stuff on social media. So every year I generally have an idea of like what's going on, who's doing well. But as to watching, if I'm home with my family in Ohio, they are Bengals fans. And so, might catch a Bengals game every now and then. And then depending on who's playing, I might watch a playoff game, and then I do watch the Super Bowl, but I watch for the commercials and the halftime show usually. So it's like, and then there's a game.
Yeah.
So I'm just never been a big NFL fan. I did not grow up, where I grew up and the time I grew up, the Bengals and Browns were not good. And so that like wasn't passed down to me in my family. Like one of my brothers is a Bengals fan because his dad was a diehard Bengals fan. But for me, it was like Ohio State. Like that's what I grew up with. And so, as I grew up and yeah, exactly. They ran the state of Ohio when I was growing up. And so for me, there was never I'm this fan or I'm this fan and then when I would watch it, it just wasn't as enjoyable for me as watching college. And so, yeah, I'll dabble every now and then, but I'm not much of an NFL fan.
Yes, I've talked about this a few times on the podcast, but I'm not a huge NFL fan. We'll get to the big reasons why, especially pertaining to this podcast. But I think just football I don't love. I don't know if I'm biased because I played for a couple of years in high school. Well, kind of won. Had a traumatic leg injury and altered a bunch of stuff. It was life-altering, actually. That's another story for another time. But there's something strange competitively and even just as a viewer. I don't like the nature of the game. I don't mean like I can't handle the hitting and stuff like that, but like I don't. There's something strange that, unlike basketball, unlike the sport I actually played, ice hockey, growing up, which I know you got some tradition ice hockey adjacent, Leith. Check out Leith's social media to see what I'm saying. But anyway.
Maybe around December 31st.
I think it's weird. There's something strange that I don't like when the best players aren't on the field or cannot be on the field when the game matters at the end. Like, it's just strange to me, like, they don't play both ways. I understand the pushback is, well, it's the ultimate team sport, blah, blah, blah. It's weird to me that 95% of the game is played one way with guys that are, like, 3-4 times my size, hitting, running, throwing the ball, catching the ball and stuff. And then the other 5% of the game, which often happens, comes down to this guy that is more my stature, actually, and it's like, can he kick this ball through this goalpost and win or lose the game? It's just, I don't like it. I like basketball. I like the end of games. You got to show up on the defensive and offensive side. Just something different about it. So that's like the sports view of why I don't love football overall. So I'm getting all my biases out there. But yeah,
that's good. Yeah. That's so good.
Hey,
so
I appreciate
important for us
you.
to get those out.
So here's where I'm going with the more serious note of why we're talking about this, though. That's my sports bias. I think the NFL, some of you guys might know this, if compared to its peers, the other major sports, NHL, MLB, NBA, some would say MLS, whatever. I think the NFL is an outlier when it comes to its ties historically and recently to racism. Also, I'm not going to say the NBA or those other leagues don't have ties. Absolutely, they all do, obviously. Leith, are you familiar with the term race norming?
I am.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. I had to refresh myself, but yes, I am familiar with it.
All right, listeners, if you guys aren't familiar with this, race norming, which has mostly come up within the NFL, recently, has been around more than recently, but has been in the news over the last couple years. Race norming is a term that can be defined, I guess, artificially adjusting. We'll give some context. Artificially adjusting black retirees, so black players, cognitive scores to assume they start with a lower cognitive baseline than white retirees. So this, of course, it's called race norming. It was approved by federal court. That was about it being overturned. Anyway, so this is a term, and I said retirees, but that was written into the bylaws or literature of the NFL. From what I read, tell me if you know differently, Leith, but in the 90s, around when former players, retirees started suing the league for post-career health issues, CTE, related to concussions and lack of concussion protocol. So a lot of us know that broad narrative at this point, that concussion, the movie Will Smith, all that stuff. It was much more than that, but that's an entry point for people that maybe aren't following right off the bat. So race norming, artificially adjusting black retirees' cognitive scores to assume they start with a lower cognitive baseline than white retirees. And specifically, this was implemented when players started suing the NFL to get money compensation for concussion syndromes in their health care. And then this is put into practice to deprive and withhold the same amount of money that was being allotted to white players from the black players. Okay. Thoughts on that first, and then we're going to unpack it a little bit, Leith. Like, is this like just give any thoughts on this? There's some obvious ones I think you'll have, but
I mean, while people I think were made aware, and it felt maybe new when it came to light with the NFL, it's something, if you read more about it, it's something, race norming has been around for centuries, like it's not a new thing. I find it, as I was refreshing myself when we were texting yesterday, because this race norming is not something that you hear, like that terminology used often in a lot of conversations. It's a very specific context or thing that you're referring to, and it depends on how you're referring to it. And so just reading about it, it's just wild to me that it's a practice that the NFL has implemented and has used, and the fact that it had to go to court to be overturned, and still there's some remnants of it that they're still using. And I think for me, like, kind of, my initial thoughts are, it's just wild that, you have these men putting their lives on the line, like we saw with Damar Hamlin, right? Like, the man died on the field, and, shout out to the Bills medical staff, and their quick response, but they're literally putting their lives on the line. And for what they experience after when they finish playing, right? And so all this stuff that's come out, but in a league that's 70% black, and then you turn around and see the compensation is like they're literally fighting to say, hey, like, we put our lives on the line, we brought in all this revenue, and then you're going to tell us, because there's no scientific evidence to back this up, you're going to tell us, like, our cognitive levels are lower, so you're not going to give us the compensation we need to care for ourselves. And to me, that in a league that generates so much money, that is so outward facing, that is so global, the fact that that's a policy that they had used and that many people didn't know about until they started getting sued by players, it's just insane to me and not surprising. If you pay attention or know any of the histories, things like that, you put two and two together pretty quickly. And so it's not surprising to me, but it's wild. It's pretty insane that they're using that they've been using it, and they've been fighting it.
Yeah, I mean, some context that I found is I think it's helpful to acknowledge biases, and then also to get some context and to ask questions that may be fairly obvious to paint with broad strokes to get to the bottom of things. So I think maybe a pushback could be, okay, well, is this legal, or was this actually wrong? I know people like us are going to be like, absolutely, no questions asked. But I looked some of it up, and one of the articles you and I read, it brought up with the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1991. It's not super long ago by any means, but race norming and any other means of changing or modifying employment-related tests on the basis of race or ethnicity became illegal. So literally illegal. Like, that's like spot on to me. No, like, leaves no room for imagination. It's like, okay, so the NFL did this black and white no pun intended, illegal thing. So that's out there. And so I want to talk a little bit about what you said, that it's been around for a long time. And I think the fact that this thing has been around for a long time is both related and also needs to be separated of how recent this has been going on in the NFL. So 2013 is when the settlement with the NFL came out, with settling with the players that were suing them for the concussion-related issues, post-career, all the retirees. However, it looks like on June 2nd, 2021 is when they decided to discontinue the race norming stuff. So 2021, we're barely in 2024, 3 years ago. Not even fully 3 years ago, is when they decided, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. And again, it was brought up when they were sued again. So it wasn't enough to just get sued the first time. It's being sued again. So this wasn't brought to the forefront. So I want to bring this stuff up because we started this episode with talking about mainly my disdain for the NFL. And it's because of stuff like this that I just think it makes them be an outlier and unique compared to these other leagues. And I'm not trying to pat the other leagues on the back, but just to show how egregious some of this stuff runs. And Leith, you and I know that there's been consistent pushback to, which we'll get to in a minute, of people like Colin Kaepernick, Ed Reed, and people that bring up this stuff and are kind of allergic to the notion that any of this could be related to something like slavery, right? Like, which Colin Kaepernick brought a lot of awareness to in comparison to, and even that Netflix series he put out. And I know a lot of people's reaction is like, oh, well, that's a little too far. We're way past that, and that's, too much. But it's stuff like this, because I'd say what you're talking about is this race norming thing that's literally not to the same extent, but it's remnants of what was happening when slavery was legal. Yes. And again, I'll say again, this thing in 2021 right now, illegal, like by the Constitution, like illegal. So we've covered all that. So I wanted to shed some light on maybe even some potential pushback, because I think it's egregious, and there's a lot of different direction I want to go with this, because I think it touches on a lot of issues. And of course, we're doing this. Before we hit record, Leith, I said thanks for coming on. I wanted to ruin everybody's Super Bowl plans, which I'm kind of joking, but anyway. Okay, one more thing, because I know I can just kind of talk and say stuff flippantly, but let's compare my favorite league, the NBA. I'll say this. If this was the NBA or something like this comes out about the NBA, maybe it is. If there's something out there, please tell me and I'll read into it. But I'll be the first one to peace out from the NBA. I'm serious. This stuff is extremely real to me, and I think it matters. But some things, I don't know, Leith, if you have any other examples, some comparable things that I've been aware of that I think the posture of the commissioners and league officials or whatever, execs, I think react differently, as well as the players, is, remember the Los Angeles Clippers, Donald Sterling was caught on a hot mic using, saying some really racist language, racial slurs, and then last name Sarver, the Suns owner, recently had some really problematic things he was caught saying. And then the Atlanta Dream, the WNBA senator.
Oh yeah,
Loeffler.
Yeah, she was a senator and part owner of the Dream.
Kelly Loeffler, senator, part owner of the Dream.
Oh, I had suppressed that.
Yeah.
Gosh.
I don't necessarily think she said anything as egregious as Donald Sterling or Sarver, but was advocating against the women's support for BLM or whatever. In all three cases, led largely by the players through protest and through awareness, and then I think working with the owners and commissioner, those three people were essentially ousted and their teams are owned by different people now. And then the women, shout out to, the Atlanta Dream, took it into politics and elections and made sure she didn't win the next election. Mm-hmm. So I just think that it
was great.
Yeah, I just think that there's a different activistic, whatever is that word, reaction from the leagues in a very disproportionate way. So it might sound like I'm patting the NBA in the back, but really what I'm shedding light on is like the NFL is the most powerful league in the country, most wealthy league. Like people turn up for football games. It's like it's in our culture, and that's fine. But we got to talk about this stuff, and I think it can be a distracting time, especially now with it being Super Bowl week, to kind of move on from these extremely real things. Like these players already put their lives on the line, are suffering immensely, some dying because of that, and then are being deprived of compensation that they are owed behind the scenes. And we're supposed to, I feel like, expected to go on and love that the NFL has quote unquote moved on from these issues, from Colin Kaepernick kneeling. We have we have rappers and R&B artists doing the halftime show now. We're good. I think it's important to bring these up because these issues aren't gone. I remember you brought up, I think last time we were on here, Leith, but Brian Flores, former coach of the Miami Dolphins, suing the league for racial discrimination. There's other things we can talk about, but I've been talking too much. Anything you want to add to this, to the outrage here, Leith?
Excuse me. Goodness. It's interesting. I think when people, like you're talking about like pushback or like comparison, right? And people are so quick to do that. And granted, it's worth conversation. Like, okay, well, let's look at the NBA or let's look at the NHL. Or let's look at these other major, entities. That's fine. Like that's worth a conversation. But what it does is it pulls away from what needs to be discussed in the moment, right? Like the NFL, you don't need to always compare. Like, let's just talk about the NFL. Like, let's talk about the history, the realities, right? The things that are still prominent, the things that the NFL hasn't dealt with. And so when I think about like potential pushback, one, like the history research is there. Like you can easily find the articles, right, about the NFL being sued. You can see their policies, like you can see the things that they're doing now, right? And so like let's just have that conversation and we can compare and go back and forth about that afterwards. I think the NFL and again, like any major corporation, any organization, especially when it comes to race and its bad past regarding that, it's excuse me, really easy to just want to cover up, like you said, like, oh, we signed with Jay-Z, which I think we're going to get to, and we have these performers and we started this coalition with the players. Like, look at what we're doing. And that's a trend everywhere, right? Like, yeah, we had this bad past and we did these bad things, but like, look what we're doing now. We settled with them. We didn't, from what I've read. Now, I could be wrong. The NFL hasn't acknowledged and said, you know what? Race norming was a horrific policy that we had. It was a horrific thing that we had that was tied to compensation for our players. We acknowledge that it did, when we went through our settlements, like it did benefit the former white players and minimize the payout for the black players. Like I haven't heard an admission to that, right? It's just like, oh, we've settled. You get to Colin Kaepernick. It's like, oh, behind the scenes, like him and Eric Reed, they got their little settlement. Like we settled with him. Let's move on, and we're not blackballing him. He just isn't good enough. Yeah. Like they can say that, right? And so I think, excuse me.
You're good.
Lord have mercy. So I think for me, it's one thing, like, activate and work towards something, right? Like, okay, you have your players involved and you're saying that you're working to, quote, inspire change. That's great. but you need to acknowledge what has been present, right? Like you need to own up to that. You need to admit that. You need to say, here, yeah, this actually was racist. We're going to acknowledge that. And here's the things that we're doing to try to rectify that. We are going to pay what you are owed, and you should pay, and then some, for the fact that you had a policy in place that was, they said legally it was illegal in 1991. So why in 2021 is it just now being, done away with? Why is it that players sued in 2013, and then it wasn't until years later where the former black players finally received some compensation? The settlement went from like 350 something like that up to $1 billion, right? Because the former black player said, "Hey, why aren't we seeing any of that money? Like, hold on, time out. We all have CTE, right?
Yes.
We all have these issues." And so I think that's, again, if there's pushback, I would love to have that conversation, because for me, it's, so what do we need to push back on? Just like this is some of the reality. And again, the NFL isn't this anomaly. Like the NFL is like fill in the blank, right? Where you've had this history in this past that racism has been the thread. And if I get on my soapbox for just a moment, when people say like slavery was so long ago, blah, 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 race norming is tied to slavery. So you see a belief that is not true being used in one of the largest sports entities in the world. Okay. The NBA has been global, right? The NFL is just getting global, but you look at the revenue, like the amount of money that comes in, right? Like it is known on a global stage. Okay. So you have a belief that you've been using that is literally tied. Like if you read some history books, go and research, that was connected to slavery. And so what happens is, again, in our country is, and again, this isn't just to the U.S. either. This happens around the world. But in our context, when you look at the institution of slavery and the way that the remnants of that were not dealt with, you're going to continue to see that over and over and over and over. It's literally into the very fabric of our nation. It's been in laws. It's been in policies. It's been part of institutions. It's part of people's belief system. And so when you don't deal with it, when you don't fully deal with it, just because you abolish it and say, hey, okay, we passed a law, it's illegal now, but we're not going to do anything with the remnants of it. It goes into sharecropping, and this is where you get Jim Crow law, like segregation, like it just continued to mass incarceration. Like you see the loophole of the 13th Amendment, right? All of these things are connected to something. They didn't just come up out of nowhere. So all to say, when you see the NFL is using something like race norming and you read a few things and say, wait a second, they believed that during slavery. That's why they operated the ways that they did. And that's being used in the NFL. You see why people say, hold on a second. So yeah, they're getting paid millions of dollars, but the labor they're putting out, Roger Goodell, what's his contract? His contract just got extended again. He makes an outrageous amount of money and does not put his life on the line at all. The owners, how many owners? I mean, we can have that conversation, right? Again, and so the remnants of that are still very present in our organizations, in our institutions today. And the NFL, it clearly is present there too. And so let's have that conversation. And it is like we get distracted. Toni Morrison, I'm going to paraphrase, but she talks about how we get distracted. Like racism is a distraction. Like we get distracted by these things, right? And so let's get distracted by, yes, I'm going to watch on Sunday because I want to see Usher. I'm a millennial. So the fact that Usher is performing at halftime, I would just own that. I live in that tension because my millennial heart is so stinking happy that I get to see Usher perform because I probably can afford a concert ticket. Okay. So let me get this free concert. Okay. So there's that. So Rihanna last year, like, oh my gosh, Rihanna's been not making music and doing her, beauty line thing, but she's performing at the Super Bowl. Okay. Got excited about that. So there is that, but that doesn't negate, there's some very real things that we need to talk about that are very present, not simply, again, Colin Kaepernick just isn't good enough to play. That's a lie. If we want to have that conversation, let's look at the amount of quarterbacks in the league. He is better. Come on, you guys. He is better than some of the guys I've seen get signed.
Jay
when
Cutler.
It's like, oh shoot, our starter and our second string went out. We got this. Come on now. Like it's intentional. That's the thing. Like a lot of these things are intentional. So, I'll give my soapbox there, but I just think if someone wants to have any pushback, I'm like, there's so much there that's present and real. And again, the remnants of the institution of slavery and how that has just carried on for years is very real, and we have to talk about that. And so the NFL, I don't care how much money you give to nonprofits and organizations. I don't care what initiative you have. You're making it, you're putting on this appearance like, look at what we're doing. But if you look at who's affected and the players who have generated the revenue for you to even be able to give that much money to organizations, and anyone can give money. That's the other thing too. Let me just say this last thing, because I've been in spaces, predominantly white spaces, where people are like, well, look at how much money they gave. And I'm like, I don't care. Just because you can write a check, you know how easy it is to raise some money when you check a few
should we talk
boxes?
about the wealth gap?
When you do that, when you check a few boxes, it's really easy for you to be able to raise some money and then write some checks. That's easy to do. It's not that hard. I've seen it happen. I was part of an organization for 10 years where I saw that happen. It was so easy. They lost a bunch of money and literally made it up within a year. I wonder why. I wonder how. It's the math is mathing, guys. Okay. So, people say, oh, they gave this much money. That doesn't matter. That doesn't change anything. People are not changed because they can write a check and give some money. People are changed when they actually deal with the bias. That's what we talked about earlier. Like, let me deal with my sports biases, right? Like the biases, the stereotypes, the things that they believe about people. There are people in the NFL who were around when those policies were put into place to say, no, we believe that, okay. We believe that Black players' cognitive ability is less than white players. Like someone had to sit around a table and say, yep, let's put that in. We're going to put that in our policy. So if this happens, if we get sued and, people have been saying, oh, I've had these issues, we're going to use this so we don't have to pay as much
great.
money.
Like it wasn't, obviously they got caught when they got sued, but when you get sued, they had to
Precisely.
be convinced that what they were doing was wrong. I love what you said, intentional. The intentionality of putting that into their bylaws wasn't. Now I get they were behind the scenes not wanting to advertise it because they're not stupid. That's the whole thing. They're not stupid, but they were. It was also a safety net. They believed it so much that they're like, okay, we're good. We can. It's in writing. They're not getting money because we believe they are cognitively less able. I'd say craziness, but like you said, wasn't incredibly surprised. I'm more surprised by pushback, I guess. Not that there is pushback, but just the amount of belief that this is something that's easily explained away. A couple of things. We gotta move on to this next part, which we're gonna even just segue, not completely leave this. But I did not know about these guys. There's a podcast called Blackballed. I don't know if you ever heard of that or listened to that, Leith. It's on the Ringer podcast network. It came out a couple years ago. It's it's a 4-episode mini series, I guess you can call it, on this very thing we're talking about, the history of it. So 1946, these guys are referred to as the Forgotten Four. So I guess it kind of makes sense we don't know about them. Kenny Washington, Woody Strode, Bill Willis, and Marion Motley reintegrated professional football in 1946. I think it was right before actually Jackie Robinson, they say on there, breaking the color barrier with the MLB. They're known as the Forgotten Four, blah, blah, blah. Go listen to it. It's called Blackballed. I'll put it in the show notes. But it kind of unpacks where this sentiment came from of owners essentially having, I think they call it a gentleman's agreement to exclude Black players. And there was a span for about 13 years after they played where it was just this. So it wasn't written like the race norming thing, but it was just, okay, we're literally, I think they say a gentleman's agreement in the podcast to exclude Black players. So it's not that long, 1946. There's still people who own teams and who are higher up in the league that are still tied to that time. The league isn't that old. That wasn't that long ago. So Forgotten Four, I just wanted to put them out there. I'd never heard about them. So go check out that podcast and read up
good.
on them.
Thanks for sharing that.
And then the last thing, like, we can't completely move on except for another thing I sort of learned about, had known broadly the story, but not completely, is, do you know Nate? You heard the name Nate Boyer? Okay, so Nate Boyer, for those of you who don't know, is the former. I didn't know he was in the NFL. He had a short stint, I think, with the Seahawks in the NFL, but then became a Green Beret. I think he's retired from both. And when Colin Kaepernick, I keep saying neck, I know how to say his name, Kaepernick, started kneeling and sitting. Actually, he people don't know, he first sat like 2 or 3 times during the national anthem to raise awareness of how this country treats black people. And Nate Boyer, there's a great interview on NPR with him, said that it struck a chord with him, as it did with many people, as a military man, as, you know, disrespectful, which I thought was interesting because I didn't know that's where this conversation and relationship started originally. But he said he contacted or wrote an open letter to Kaepernick about that being disrespectful to whatever, to the flag or to the country. Okay. Colin Kaepernick contacted him and wanted to talk and have a conversation, which I thought was fantastic. And from that conversation, Nate Boyer, former Green Beret, former NFL player, eventually ended up saying, "Hey, you should kneel." And they had a nuanced conversation, essentially like a compromise, dare I say, on how to respectfully protest. Okay, I say all this because I think there's so much pushback, and so many people, including me, like, I didn't know the entire story, have so much to say about the whole disrespecting the flag and whatnot, and how that's not what was going on. Like, it's literally not the intent, and literally not what was going on. Now, Nate Boyer says, I don't speak for everybody in the military, which I feel like he didn't have to say that, but unfortunately, he probably did. That kneeling was kind of, a respect thing. Like, it was the opposite. Like, you kneel when you propose, usually. You kneel at grave sites. Like, you kneel, I think you kneel when you get knighted. Like, you kneel out of so many things that are about respect. And I hate the refusal to people to acknowledge that it wasn't out of a pointed intention to disrespect the country. It's actually the opposite, to hold the country accountable. And you've touched on how we've always been allergic to accountability. Like, racism is adaptable. It's always going to find a new iteration. So I thought that was really interesting because, Nate Boyer voicing his concern, or that it struck a chord that he was sitting, because that can be a little more, I can see what he's saying, like, maybe comes off as disrespectful. But then Kaepernick, his bottom line was like, I want to raise awareness and protest respectfully, and then taking his suggestion of kneeling. So, like, this whole pushback on disrespecting the military, disrespecting the flag, disrespecting your country, like, this guy, former NFL player, a Green Beret, you can't be more military than that, gave him this idea. And so, like, there's that argument just doesn't hold up, y'all, if you're pushing back on this. And I think this is a little more lighthearted, but is a little easier to see is, and again, I'm not the biggest NFL follower, as I've already admitted, but I think you can see fans' reactions and which players are getting this kind of pushback throughout the last few years since Kaepernick. I was struck by when Deshaun Watson, I know there's a bunch of stuff come out with him over the last few years, but at the time, Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes their teams locking arms the first game of the season, I think maybe 2021, 2022, and I think this is in KC, just relentless boos from the fans, from against the face of the league, for just locking arms out of raising awareness and solidarity against racism. So there's that. So what do we do with that? People that want to just move on, what do we want to do with that? Until what was it? Just last year, and I feel like people are sick of hearing this, and they think it's kind of lighthearted. But guys, we had a team called the Redskins. The Redskins. Okay, I'm just gonna move on from that one. We've got all these quarterbacks that spend day in and day out in close relationship with all these players. Like a lot of former coaches like to say, you know, I've been around black players my whole life, so I'm not racist. So we've got all these white quarterbacks and these white coaches around all these black players, which makes them not racist. And then you've got, and they're supposed to be in solidarity with all of them. And then after all this stuff happens, it seems like everyone's understanding what's going on with the whole Kaepernick kneeling thing and whatnot. You got guys like former quarterback Drew Brees, then after all that saying, well, you know, I know we've done all this, and this, but I'm just never going to disrespect the flag. Taking it back to the most basic entry point to this whole conversation. Like, I'm never going to disrespect the flag because my grandpa fought in World War II. It's like, that's, again, you're missing the point. Look, I might take some flack for this, but Tom Brady being a pretty outspoken Trump supporter, and there's a lot of the owners that are like that, like just stuff like that that's interesting. I'll leave it at that to me. Roger Goodell going on stuff like Uncomfortable Conversations with Emmanuel Acho, and to me saying absolutely nothing that was helpful. Just things like this keep happening. I'm like, what? We can't move on when nothing's being done. That's beyond performative. Okay. We could camp out here too long, but I'm going to segue to this. You brought this up, Leaf. NFL halftime show. I think it was 2019. NFL and Jay-Z, who was company Rock Nation. They did a partnership, which I think $20-30 million partnership, to be kind of the face of the NFL social change initiative. And a lot of that has to do with the Super Bowl. Super Bowl halftime show, and throughout the season, bringing in, having say on what kind of artists perform at, I guess, other halftimes throughout the year and bigger events and stuff like that. So, okay, Jay-Z, one of the most well-known musical artists, rappers, blah, 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 like, you know, greatest of all time in a lot of people's eyes. As a musician in general, probably. Signs this deal, 2019, so do the math, like, in the heart of a lot of stuff we're talking about. Obviously, and I want to have a nuanced conversation about this, but two ends of the spectrum are going to be, oh my gosh, this is amazing, amazing progress. We got Jay-Z and the NFL in a deal together. And then the other pushback is Jay-Z should be ashamed of himself. This is just a money grab at the expense of the issues a la Colin Kaepernick. So I think it's an important conversation, like you're saying, because I think there's a lot of nuance in there. And, I mean, look, one example, just off the cuff, was even Rihanna last year. She performed, but she's actually somebody that declined a couple years earlier when all this was going on out of solidarity. Like, I'm not doing that. That's performative. And then I saw it was interesting. I'm not even saying it's bad or good. I'm just like, you know, then 2 years later, she's doing it. So it's like, what are we supposed to think? And the backdrop, Leaf, to this is, how should we view specifically musical artists who advocate for things like social change? Like, should they be held accountable for this stuff? Or should we just be viewing them as it's artistry and it's about money? So, all right, thoughts on that as the Usher fan?
I think if, you know, there's a lot that comes with being a public figure. You know, you'll hear a lot of people say that. And, you know, if you're going to make a choice to be outspoken about something or to acknowledge something publicly, like, there it is, accountability, which we all should experience. It may not be as public, but if I say something, and I speak out against, speak out to something, I hope my community of people will be, and then I do something that contradicts that. I hope my community of people will be like, hey, you said this and then you did this. Help us understand, right? Like that should be, people are so scared of accountability. If you're the right, if you're the right people in your life, then it's actually really good because it helps us grow. So
yes.
Granted, now when you're a public figure and you have millions of people, you have fans all over the world, like that's a whole nother level. And there's a lot of weight that comes with that. But you still make a choice, right? To make a public stance about something, to respond to something. And so I think my answer is yes, I think people should be held accountable for what they say or don't say and what they do and don't do, right? When you have a platform and you have resources, right, that can help shift and change some things, that can bring certain things to the light, right? And so it's interesting that, the conversation around, in this particular case, like music artists and, holding them accountable, this has been around in music and the arts for decades. This is nothing new, right? I was just, on my Instagram, I've been highlighting women every day who are connected in some way to the civil rights movement, because I feel like the women are so behind the scenes in a lot of ways and just have not gotten the recognition, acknowledgement, and respect that they deserve. And so I was like, you know what? Every day I'm going to post something. So, and for my own learning too, because there's women I just don't know about. So last night, my post was on Ruby Dee. She was well known in the arts, so performing on Broadway. She was nominated for an Oscar in 2008 for her role in American Gangster with Denzel. Oh, okay. She's just starred in so many things, but she also, her and her husband, Ozzie Davis, saw that the arts were a way for them to highlight these inequalities, to highlight the negative portrayals of African Americans in the arts, right? And so they took it upon themselves to then write plays and be in films where they countered that portrayal in Hollywood and on Broadway of these negative portrayals of African Americans, to say, we're going to actually write stuff where Black people are displayed in a positive light. We're gonna play roles that are like, quote, non-traditional, to really say that narrative is wrong. And we're going to show up at the March on Washington. They were the, they call, I think this language is very odd, but the master and mistress of ceremonies for the March on Washington for jobs and freedom in 1963. And Ruby Dee was part of a group of artists who formed, I think it's called like Association of Artists for Freedom or something like that, also in 1963, right? So again, you have that. I think that's an example, right, of you have a platform, you have some resources, right? And so you're saying, I'm going to do what I do, I'm going to do it well, but I'm human, I also care about these things. So coming to our present day, I do think when artists are saying something or showing up on a certain stage, right, to, there's that back and forth of like, well, they don't have to explain themselves. I'm like, I mean, they don't, but it would be helpful when you've said X, Y, and Z, right? And so I think when you have made a stance about something, or you've posted something, right? And we're humans, and we're always evolving and changing. So my thing is just have integrity. If your view has changed on it, if your stance has changed on it, just say that. I know there's the fear of being canceled and all this craziness that we experience now because of social media. But there's some of that, like, let's just live in the tension of that. Like, just be true to who you are. And if that's where you land, just say that's where you're landing. People are going to like it, and some people are going to like it. But can you walk away and say, man, I feel like I've been very true to myself, and people are going to like it or not like it regardless. It doesn't matter. Whatever stance you take, some are going to like it, some won't, right? And so you're going to have that. But can you have some integrity to stand on? And integrity is huge for me. So I think that is something. It's not just the accountability, it's the integrity. And so that's my long answer to say I do think there's a place to hold public figures accountable for what they do and they don't do when they've said and done certain things, saying I'm this advocate, I'm this activist, I'm this ally. But then some of the receipts don't add up
literal
to that.
Receipts, like,
and that's a bit confusing. So yeah.
That was great. yeah, I receive and follow everything you're saying. I think something that is interesting with Jay-Z to me, because I agree with you, like accountability, people are probably sick of me talking about that on here, but integrity are huge for me for sure. Something just interesting like about Jay-Z to me is it gets muddy for me because I think it can be easy to expect accountability in a lot of scenarios. But with the Jay-Z thing, I think it's interesting because okay, so my personal views on it, to paint with broad strokes for a little bit, is that I think it was a cop-out, and I'm painting with broad strokes for this. I think it's hard not to view that as a win for the NFL only, other than Jay-Z gets more money, but I think it's at the expense. I really do. I think it's at the expense of some of the issues that Colin Kaepernick was bringing up that did not get resolved. It's another conversation. I know he settled and they got some money, but I think that just enabled the NFL, and this is 2019, to move on. Like, I think that in the public eyes, like the consumer sees that, oh, Jay-Z and Roger Goodell shaking hands, boom, we're successful. Like, this is great now. And this isn't all on Jay-Z by any means, but the timeline, like this race norming stuff is still going on. And so like that stuff is still at the expense. So it's still, we're watching that. It's a distraction. Like what you brought up, like we're watching Jay-Z produce the halftime show, convince Rihanna to come on. He's got Usher. Beyonce's done it. And we're supposed to watch that while race norming is going on and people are being deprived of healthcare that they deserve compensation for because of the NFL. So it's hard for me not to view this as I see Jay-Z literally getting money and more recognition and credit for something that Colin Kaepernick is out of the league for kneeling. Ed Reed's out of the league for kneeling. And race norming is still going on. But we're watching, it's the ultimate distraction, but we get to watch Rihanna. And to me, that is, I don't even want to just say interesting, but strange. Oh yeah, and I was coming back to Jay-Z. Like, I think that I've heard another interview on Jay-Z kind of saying, like, I don't know if he is aware of this type thing. Like, I think he believes something different, and not even in a vindictive way. Like, I've heard him talk about the Black community and be like, they're going to keep telling us we can't do this, and this, but we're coming. Like, he said something like that. I forget what interview that was. And I get it. Like, that is obviously his energy. If you listen to any of his music, or like, that is what Jay-Z is about. But to say that, to describe what he's doing with the NFL partnership, like, I just think it's a miss. Like, I don't think that's not what the criticism's coming from. So him saying that is like, no, people aren't criticizing you. That people are criticizing you because they feel like you are leaving a lot of the Black community in the dust by signing this deal, not that you don't care about, or not the opposite. So I just think that's tough, and that's always going to be at the expense of people like a Kaepernick or people that are speaking about these issues. Like, I'm not saying nothing good has happened, but to me, that it enables the NFL more than it does progress. And I think that's just, that sucks. Like, it's super unfortunate. Like, I don't necessarily know what the way forward with that is. So my activistic stance is going to be not really watch the NFL, but then also when I do watch the Super Bowl to hang out with people, I'm just going to root for Patrick Mahomes, because I think more. I'm just going to choose to believe that it's going to make people more and more uncomfortable that a Black player is the face of the league. That's just what I have to do to make myself stomach watching some of the NFL stuff. But I don't know. Did you follow that? Because I know that was a little bit roundabout.
No, I did. And, there's, and stuff like this, it's not so binary. Like I think we get caught in a like really binary thinking a lot. People say black and white, binary thinking. I do think, again, this is my opinion, that, Rock Nation agreeing to this partnership with the NFL it did serve the NFL. It made them look better. It did say, hey, look at what we're doing. We have this hip hop rap mogul, right? Billionaire, known globally. He's married to Beyonce, so that elevates his status already too, right? It's not just that he's Jay-Z. The man is married to Beyonce, okay? It is what it is, y'all. And so that elevates him as well in his status. And so for the NFL, it's like, man, we're checking the boxes, we paid out our little settlements, like, oh yeah, sorry, we did that. But hey, we signed with Rock Nation and we started this whatever that initiative, something change, whatever they call it.
Yeah.
Inspire change. And so, and then they start this coalition with players. Right. And so it's interesting because I was reading one of the articles that you had sent about Jay-Z's response to all the pushback, and he essentially said something like, if kneeling is what takes action and actually brings some change, great. But can we take some action? And I hear what he's getting at, right? Because people were not responding. It was more backlash than anything, right? So he's Kaepernick kneeling highlighted some things, not just for our country, obviously, but in the NFL, right? The response to that. But then let's look at, okay, what has the action been? Okay, let's talk about that. So you make this partnership, Jay-Z. Okay, so you're getting not just artists for halftime shows, which they were already getting before Rock Nation came around. They were getting artists to perform at halftime. Beyonce performed at the Super Bowl. Bruno Mars performed at the before. You've had people prior to Rock Nation. So for me, it's I don't think that was necessary to get certain artists or to think about how do you do the halftime shows, because a lot of people were already watching because of who was performing at halftime, or not watching because of who was performing at halftime because it wasn't that appealing. So, but then what else has happened? Okay, so we got the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing. I don't know what Rock Nation's role has been in that, but that started.
Do they do that every game?
Interesting. Okay, now the players, they do it 2021. I think they did it before every game, but now they do it before the Super Bowl.
Okay.
Because Mary did it out here in Inglewood, what was that, 2 years ago for the Super Bowl. So, and I forget who's doing it this year. So they do it for the Super Bowl and the pregame stuff. So you have that. If you look at the helmets, they've got their little whatever saying. I think about Kansas City's field. I'm not sure, again, about other fields because I don't watch NFL like that. But
that's my favorite. The end zones.
Whatever
the
saying
end zones
they
that say
have.
end racism, because
it's outrageous.
Last year, I think during the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's okay, it's a platitude. Yeah. It's such a platitude, And I think that, again, it's okay, so what change has come? Okay, you've given money to organizations, but even in the article you sent me, it's you actually didn't vet one of the organizations well, because people found receipts super quick on Twitter, and then it was justifying and oh, well, this is why I said it. It's no, but these things are connected to something so much deeper. And so, again, my question is, well, what has the change been, Jay-Z? That's a question I would love for him to answer. It's been now 5 years, going on 5 years with this partnership. I would love for him to share, what has been the change? Don't just say you gave this money and you put some decals on helmets and you put some little sayings on football fields. But what else has the change come? What other things have you dealt with? What other ways have you been challenging the leadership of the NFL, Roger Goodell, and everyone else who's a part of the decision-making? In what ways have you challenged them? In what ways are things changing? The Rooney Rule, for example, everyone knows that is just a way for the NFL to check their boxes. Everyone knows that. You have to interview certain, quote, minority candidates. But at the end of the day, when you've already well, I already know who we want.
There's no
so
accountability.
I'll check the box. I'll interview the people because I have to. But there's no accountability. So it's stuff like that where, again, understanding on a very, very, very minor level, okay, the NFL is this massively global billion-dollar industry, right? So I have no idea what that's like. On a super micro level, I've been in leadership positions, and inside of organizations at a top level to start to say, okay, you said this, you put this out there, but what about this, and this? Are we going to talk about that? Are we going to own that? Are we going to acknowledge that? I don't care that you said that in an email. When I left my previous organization, that was one of the things I said in my exit letter was I literally verbatim pulled from an email that we had received 2 years prior and said, help me understand what changes happened since this statement was made. Nothing. Actually, no, not nothing. The opposite of the very thing you said would be true that you wanted to fight for. The opposite of that is true because look at our present reality. Because you didn't do these things. You didn't deal with the stuff that's in the roots and the foundation. So for me with Jay-Z, it's the intent versus impact. The intention is I'm with Cap. I'm fist in the air. I'm rocking with Cap. That was wrong. He started something and I'm going to carry that legacy on. And I've got money and access and resources to, quote, inspire change and help the NFL deal with its racism. Okay, so 5 years later, let's do a review. What has happened? What has changed? You've given some money to organizations. Again, this is what we see. You've given some money to organizations. You put some stuff on the field. But what else have you done to deal with, to really acknowledge and to begin to remove some of the things that are actually allowing these things to carry on, right? Where the NFL can just check some boxes and keep it pushing. The NFL just announced the Eagles, they're playing their game in Brazil, right? So you go over to Europe, so you check your Europe box, right? And now you're going to Brazil. You're entering a very, very different, you already have issues at home, and you're entering a very different category by going over to Brazil, right? Again, there's a lot of good that can come from that, what it can do for some of the local economy. Oh, there's, we can have that conversation. But if you're not dealing with the effects at home, with the things that have been around since NFL has been around for decades, you're putting put a Band-Aid over the gushing wound, right? But that's really what you're doing. Like you're doing these platitudes and you're doing these things that look really good. But if you're not dealing with the stuff internally, things are not going to change on a macro level as they need to. And yes, change takes a lot of time in major organizations and corporations like that. I think it's like 7 years or something like that is the average to see like change actually begin to happen. Okay, so we're 5 years into this partnership, Jay-Z. I would love to see. You can say you want to be about this, but what are the receipts? Because we only see a part of it, right? So what's actually happening internally that you're seeing some of this change take place, and you're acknowledging. I think that's the thing where it's like, and I'm not saying just putting out a statement, but you're really actually dealing with the effects of your racist policies, of the racism that's been embedded in the league, of the way that you viewed 70% of the league.
Yeah.
You can't just say it was one player. Your views about Colin Kaepernick were just not about Colin Kaepernick. It's about any black player that would respond that way. And you had a few white players, kneel or do whatever they did, and okay, you took some flack. But you're talking about 70% of the league, 70% of what brings in your revenue, right? So let's remove that. The NFL is not the NFL. The NFL is not a global stage. The NFL is not generating billions of dollars. Like you start removing all of those things. And so I see the tension, and I think the pushback on Jay-Z is warranted for a variety of reasons. I mean, if you just look at what he said at the Grammys, right? It's like you're receiving not like a Lifetime Achievement Award, but it's like almost up there with the Dr. Dre Global Impact Award that he got. And he used that opportunity to call out the Grammys, this institution, the Recording Academy, for there's a lot of intentional things there. And you have the misogynoir, racism. There's a number of things that you can point to with the Recording Academy for why you see what you see, right? And he literally listed, we boycotted here because it wasn't being televised, and we boycotted here. Yeah, we showed up a couple years later, but like we boycotted because there's a tension they live in as in this case, I'll say black artists, right? It's not just black, but I'll just use that for this example. There's a tension that the black artists live in, right? Of, okay, so the Recording Academy has all these issues and is racist, and yet the recognition of receiving a Grammy for the work that I've put in, for the work that I've done. I see what, like Victoria Monet finally being acknowledged. Her pen game has been fire. She's been writing for artists for years and has not, people didn't know that. And then she's a best new artist, right? Because she tapped into the nostalgia of the early 2000s for all of us with On My Mama, right? But you saw her response. I mean, she ended up walking away. She was 7 Grammy nominations. She walked away with 3. Only one was televised, though. And so there's a tension even the Black artists live in with something like the Grammys. And so, again, Jay-Z, there's a tension that he's in. But my thing is just acknowledge it. Like, just stand on some of the things that you've said and make some of these things more public, because you hear all the conversation, you hear the speculation, you hear the confusion from people, you hear the people are pissed off, right? Like, the math isn't mathing from what we've seen. That's what I'm saying. This is what we've seen. The things I've listed is what we've seen. And so what is our response supposed to be? And in what ways are we not supposed to hold you accountable to the things that you've said and done? Like, help us make it make sense, you know? So what are some of the things, again, that he could point to, that he could say, here's some of the change internally.
I don't think they're
happening.
there.
It's not just this outward thing, because, they're not. That's why. So I say all that to say, you haven't said anything because it's not there. And the question is
action
why?
I think the main change that happens continues to be because of lawsuits that are brought up. Lawsuits that are being brought up about things that I think he is supposed to be working to bring about change. And maybe I'm wrong. Like, maybe it really is. Maybe the deal is like, hey, we just want you to focus on entertainment. And he's an entertainer, which is why the backdrop of the question is, are we crazy to hold these men and women accountable? You know, I don't know. But I agree. That's a great example. If you didn't see the Grammys, like, his speech there was like, he even said, like, he was even kind of nervous, like, because it's awkward, like, describing that kind of tension is not going to be super eloquent. Like, as Jay-Z, he sounded like super, like, disoriented, like, kind of like word vomit. And he was like, when I'm nervous, he said, like, when I'm nervous, I tell the truth. And it's like, well, man, maybe we need to get you more nervous and catch you off guard or something, and get you, like, saying some of this stuff. Because like you, I want to hear, like, okay, tell me what's actually happening. Oh, there's actually not that much happening. Okay, well, like, what can we do about that? Do you want to do anything about that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or are you just here for entertainment?
And if you are, then that's fine.
Which, that's a whole other conversation, right? Yeah, which is a whole other conversation about the way Black and brown folks are just used for entertainment to bring in the viewers and entertain the people and blah, blah, blah. And again, sports is entertainment too, right? That's a whole other conversation about people just want to be entertained. So don't bring up these issues and don't bring that to the forefront. Just play, just shut up and dribble. Just shut up and throw the ball, right? Like, that's where all that comes from, right? And so you're already in it's entertainment, the sports industry, and then you bring entertainment from a musical standpoint into that space. And so if you're there just for that, just say that. Just say, hey, guys, okay, so I'm not in these conversations. Like, here's what our partnership as Rock Nation with NFL, this is the lane that I'm in right here. Anything, I'm in this space, and this is what we do. So performances at halftime shows or at different, stadiums, Super Bowl, pregame, and then, we're raising money to give to organizations who are doing good work. Yeah. Okay, just say that. And that's where you want to exist and stay. People aren't going to like it, but just own it. Just stand on the integrity and own that. But when you say, and you make it seem like, oh, I'm taking on the heels of what Kaepernick started to make this, like, actually see some action. Now you've opened up another, something much bigger. And you need to be held accountable for that because you said that's what it was. So you can't be mad about being held accountable when you said this is the thing that you are going to do. Like, you've made that public. And you're not doing it. It doesn't look like that. So you can't be mad that people want to hold you accountable to that, because it has a real effect on people. And you see that these players that have put their lives on the line. Like, for them, it's like, hey, I'm real time suffering, and their families are suffering as well. Like, it's not just that, that it's like that player, but we've seen, just look up the news from the last few years where former players who have had CTE issues, and their families said, like, yeah, their behavior was, fill in the blank. Like, there were actual neurological damage, and then this was the result. It's devastating for families. And so you have that in the backdrop that needs to be at the forefront of saying there's change that you want to make, and just bringing certain artists in to perform at games and donating money is not addressing the root issues and the ripple effect that is destructive to so many families. And what's interesting, it's so destructive to Black families. That's what it is, because none of the players are Black, right? So then you come back to that conversation. And so it is nuanced. It's not as, quote, black and white or as binary as we want to make it. At the same time, there's very real things that we need to talk about. And if that's not what you're actually working towards, just say that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just own it, you know?
We're not even going to get to the Grammys and Taylor Swift or anything, because I think that would be a good conversation. Well, hold on, I'm going to do one thing. I think that would be a good conversation because of how huge she is and the whole accountability thing. We'll do this, Lee, because I don't want to just keep analyzing all of Black culture's pillar artists. Like, we could do Taylor Swift, or do we want to do NWA? Okay,
Taylor Swift.
All right, we'll do NWA another time.
I'm ready to piss off the Swifties. Come on,
I'm
ready.
real with you. I got like 5 minutes, so I'm sorry about that. All right, Leith, you're in place for this. I'm gonna put you in his place for this because you're the resident non-Swiftie or anti-Swiftie, and John Mark is usually my resident Swiftie on here. So, yeah, did you know that? I don't know.
Man, this would have been good. I did not know that.
He's kind of.
We might have to do a part 2. I want to have John Mark. We need to have some conversation about this.
Here. Although I know,
and on some real stuff, I would love to hear his perspective. Genuinely, as a quote Swiftie.
I also hear Jamar Tisby's a Swiftie.
He is. He has made that public.
It's so surprising. Anyway,
very interesting.
Well, I don't want to.
Hey,
to
each his own. To each his own.
Okay. Well, I mean, kind of the same thing with Taylor Swift is, and my wife is a huge Swiftie. I'm right in the middle. I get that. I think the criticism of her is both ridiculous and some warranted. So she is the biggest artist in the world right now. I think that's objectively true. Mm-hmm. It's fresh off the 4th win. I think with her 13th and 14th Grammy and the 4th album of the year. She's the best album maker of all time. Like, as far as accolades go.
That's what the
Academy says. Okay, I mean,
that's not true though.
We got to keep it real, Leith. Okay,
it's subjective.
Yeah. Kind of same thing. How should she be held accountable? So she's been incredibly outspoken about a lot of things, like a lot of social issues, but then at times has been, I'd say, conveniently silent about things going on with legislation in the media, all the stuff that she's associated with. And to me, I kind of asked the same kind of question. This was, we don't have time to bring up NWA and Ice Cube, but this is what I'm saying. Like, okay, is it crazy to hold people accountable or to hold these artists accountable for things they advocate for, specifically, maybe not just specifically, but largely in their music and then just, in interviews and stuff when it really matters? Because I think, I'll paraphrase a little bit what happened with Ice Cube and NWA. NWA known for Straight Outta Compton and Ice Cube, and I think everybody associates them with rapping and singing about police brutality, paint with broad strokes. And then just recently, within the last year or so, Ice Cube sits down with Tucker Carlson from Fox News at the time, who's one of the most, outspoken against everything about what I would think Ice Cube would stand on. And then Ice Cube, when asked about what he thinks about policing now, you got to listen to it a couple times because I don't know if everyone pick up on this, but says that essentially, I think, says we got to understand where the police are coming from. I don't want to open up a can of worms, have a giant conversation right now about it, but to me, that is, if he's been somebody that people have looked up to for whatever, liberation and bringing awareness to really real issues, I'd assume, like in the communities he's rapping about, that's almost unforgivable at this point to I feel like renege what he's essentially stuck his whole career on in a performative, hey, look, I can talk to this Fox News guy and we can all just get along type thing. But back to Taylor Swift, very outspoken about women's rights, the LGBTQ plus community, and whatnot. The Black community have been very supportive of bringing, collaborating with other artists, like and Ice Spice and stuff. But then when associated with like a Matt Healy or things are going on in the country that are hurting those communities, in the midst of all of her success, has been silent at times. So what's your perspective on these things? It's okay if you camp out with Taylor Swift.
You know, you get labeled a hater, right? Because I don't like Taylor Swift's music. I think it all
That's the
sounds
most
the
provocative
same.
thing you've said.
And it's absolutely subjective. There's people have been posting just like some history about this, in particular with the Grammys. You know, the fact that she won her 4th album of the year is outrageous in comparison to, and even her fans I've seen on TikTok have said Midnight's was not her best album. Like, there's no way she should have won that over SZA, over Lana Del Rey, even someone else that was in the category, right? So again, it's very subjective, and everyone knows too. I mean, it's an assumption, but people wanted her to win that. Mm-hmm. Like, let's just be real. Okay. Side note. So again, the accountability piece. So yes, if you're going to be, we can't expect everyone. We all don't do this, right? So even with public figures, we all do not speak out on every single issue, right? Anyone can sit up and say, did you speak out about, let's fill in the blank, do. Well, I spoke up about that. I spoke up about that, but I didn't do that, blah, blah, blah. Like, we don't have enough time to speak up on all the issues, right? So there's that backdrop. Again, when you choose to speak out on certain things, now here comes a level of accountability because you've made that public. One of the biggest critiques about Taylor Swift that irritates me about a lot of Swifties is they will not acknowledge that Taylor Swift weaponizes her feminist takes and her feminism when it is convenient for her. And there are receipts for days about that. I have listened to countless people talk about and piece things together when she responds to stuff and when she doesn't. And it's a part of, again, this is a much larger conversation. So you have the overarching feminism, right, where people just kind of throw that out there. But then within that, you have white feminism. And white feminism is weaponized by white women all the time. Again, I am opening a can of worms, and we don't have enough time to talk about that, so we can do a part 2 if we need to. But Taylor Swift does that. Taylor Swift shows up to respond to things when it is convenient. And people have said that. I even saw some of her fans, again, I've been on TikTok watching a bunch of stuff. Some of her fans have started to admit that and acknowledge that. They've said, man, I've tried to give her credit. I've tried to excuse it, but like, here's the reality. And you can see it play out. For example, you reference Ice Spice. How convenient to do a collaboration with Ice Spice just a month or two after the things that she either was dating or not dating Matt Healy, but the absolutely horrific and disturbing things that he said
super racist
about Black women. And then you collaborate with Ice Spice to say, hey, I'm not going to say anything about what he said. And her team said, well, they were just really casual. I don't give a bleep if they were casual or if they were like hand in hand about to get married. You have associated yourself with someone to some extent. You should be responding to that. And your team, what did you do? And then they're like, well, Ice Spice's team reached out first. Nope. Stop it. Stop right there. You could have collaborated with a bunch of different artists. Ice Spice, that seems very convenient when that was one of the specific people that Matt Healy referenced in his horrifically racist and misogynistic rant. But you're a feminist? Come on, girl.
Yeah, I think...
Come on now.
Yeah, I remember...
She responds to things when it's convenient for her because of her image, and she plays into... Again, there's history behind this. That's the thing that... I posted this on my Instagram the other day because it really just it fires me up, is within the context of feminism, the piece about white feminism, there's history tied to that. There is a way that white women who say they're feminists, a lot of them show up, and it's for their own benefit. And Taylor Swift, there's literally in some of her lyrics, people have pointed out that she's staying in this particular category within the broad stroke of feminism, and not enough people are talking about that. And so it really does. This isn't just about her not being I don't think she's one of the best artists. She speaks to a certain genre of people, and there's a reason why people like some of her stuff. But again, I'm not just talking musically, like it's so much bigger than that. Right. And so anyways, I know we got to wrap up. I would love to do a part 2 because I really think that this conversation needs to be had more. And I feel like what happened at the Grammys, people are finally being open to that conversation and being able to admit some things of like, you plugged an album after saying you got your 13th Grammy. People don't do that at the Grammys. So that's why you got the response you did. Then you operated another way when you won Album of the Year. Like, there are things that are there that, guys, she just wasn't shocked. Like, come on now. And we can debate this all we want to. That's fine. But there's a lot of things that we need to pay attention to that people aren't. And Taylor Swift is not some innocent 14-year-old that needs protecting, and people are still treating her like that because of what happened with Kanye back in VMAs years ago. That's where this stemmed from, and people have to have connected those dots. And so, anyhow, I absolutely think she needs to be held accountable, and the convenience of when her quote activism shows up needs to be discussed.
We gotta do part 2 because we opened up too many cans of worms. Just up and coming artists: Jay-Z, Taylor Swift, Ice Cube. Nothing big there. So nuanced. I think last thing, like on the Grammys, I can't have a big enough opinion on like the other albums because I didn't listen to them. So I'm not so much on the side of like that she shouldn't have won type thing. I don't have a horse in that race necessarily, but I can think of like the thing I did listen to most recently as far as Grammys go. Words are hard. Is like I've heard people talk about like Renaissance, with Beyonce. I don't have like an opinion. I didn't listen. So like, I have listened to a good amount of Taylor Swift. Like I said, my wife's a huge Swiftie, and I think she's great. Like music, especially musically, I think she's great. I think all these criticisms are absolutely fair. I have the same criticisms, and so do like Swifties I know. Like they understand like some of this nuance, and like we definitely got to do part 2. But I think that when Beyonce should have won for Lemonade. Like to me, like I stand by that. I'm like if that kind of album doesn't win, like it's something's wrong. That should have for sure won over Adele, who I love. Like Adele's amazing, but even Adele, if you watch that, Adele's Lemonade should have won. Yep. Why am I up here? What is happening? It's like, absolutely, that should have won. I say all that because I want to be fair to, but like I don't want to be a both siders for right now. Like I don't think it's just like, oh my gosh, we gotta give this to Beyonce because she hasn't gotten it. Like I think there's too much of that going on. It's like, well, that's not the answer. Don't just be like, oh, let's give it to her because she needs it, and we got to be anti Taylor Swift. But I think the nuanced conversation about how did we get here in the first place is what needs to be happening. So I say all that like I didn't listen to every album that was up, but that year I did listen. I knew Adele and Lemonade. It's like, how do you not like that should have won? I know we're saying all this is subjective, but it's like, no, that's greatness. Like that's what wins.
I mean, it's subjective, but voters have anonymously admitted that like last year, they literally said Beyonce's won the most Grammys and been the most nominated. They admitted anonymously, we don't vote for Beyonce because she wins too much. So actual voters,
that's always going to be the issue.
Anonymously made that public. So right there, it's not simply just, oh, it's subjective. No, people are intentionally choosing not to vote for someone because she, quote, wins too much. That's insane. When you're talking about what's the best
and like,
body
is that
of
happening
work.
with Taylor Swift?
So,
SZA could bring us to that.
For example, precisely in this particular instance, right? Last thing I'll say with this, SZA had 9 nominations. 9. She performed 3 songs. She did 2 of her songs on the stage, and then she did that like when they went to commercial, and she did a whole nother song. So just that alone, and everyone said, people have said it, again, Swifties have said, Midnights is not Taylor Swift's best album in comparison to what she's won Album of the Year for previously. So help us understand, how was SOS not the best body of work? That's anyone that is musically inclined and understand. That was the best, but you don't get 9 Grammy nominations and perform and do all that if your album is not the best that came out that year.
Yeah.
So when voters last year admitted we didn't vote for Beyonce because she wins too much, that tells me, so the way you're voting
I didn't
is
think
very
about
intentional. There's a lot more behind it than simply it's the best body of work.
All the nominations for, and then not to win the big. Yeah, that sounds like a, yeah, that
it's
sounds
outrageous.
like an obvious thing, but I just was, and now that you're saying that, putting that together. Yeah. I guess it'd be like Hamilton that year, getting all those nominations and then not winning. Yeah.
Like, you can't say someone doesn't have the best album when they're up for so many awards for singles and best R&B song and all of that. Like, you can't say someone doesn't get that many nominations if their album wasn't the best. Like, clearly by getting the nominations, people are saying, hey, man, that body of work you put out,
it's like in the NBA,
really
let's
good.
bring it full circle. Like, LeBron should have at least 8 MVPs probably, but people are like, oh, he got too much, so let's cut off at 4, even though for a while he was still getting better. It's like, but how am I not still the MVP when I'm better than I was these other 4 years? Anyway, all right, we gotta go. Leith, thank you so much. We'll obviously do a part 2, maybe 3, 4, 5, because this is, oh man,
I got to get on here with John Mark. I need to.
Yeah,
I
John
want
Mark's
to
gonna come on
have this
here
conversation.
and make his defense. I might just mute my. I'm gonna mute my mic and have you guys just come on. I'll sign you guys on. All right, you guys. Thank you, Lee. Thank you so much for coming on here, listeners. Thank you as always for listening. The music you're listening to is done by our guy Dylan Dent. Or it might be background music from Anchor, but I'll get both of those in here. And our artwork was, of course, created by our friend, Lee's friend as well. Shout out Ashley Bush. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll catch you guys next time. Peace.
The nightmare might scare you, no worse than reality. They hunt you by day, R.I.P. Ahmaud Arbery. Everybody got a time, but that's less than comforting. I hope I'm alive by the time they choose to comfort me. Mosquitoes in the vein, or leeches on my soul. This money on my mind is a fracture in my bones. You get crippled by continuing existence like a ghost. And they wonder why we drink, and they wonder why we smoke, and they wonder why we think that everything's a joke. I'm shocked that we can sleep, must be the thought of letting go.